Okay, last part. Actually, before we come to the last concept that Weber introduces, party, I actually want to say a few more things about the relationship between class and status. Imagine a society that is in which stratification is based purely on individual merit, which would be a system that's called meritocracy. Meritocracy is a system in which your position in society and your influence, your responsibilities, are determined purely by your individual merit, so by your individual talent. So you could say a combination of IQ, being intelligent, and effort. What would you think of a society like that? More just, more fair, less fair?
It sounds fair, I think.
It sounds fairer, right?
It sounds fair.
It sounds fairer that your position is determined actually by what you really as an individual have to contribute, how clever you are, and how much effort you put into but in combination with your cleverness. Well, I recommend the reading of this book very, very highly. I know you have a lot of other things to read. Reading Weber alone is enough, but The Rise of the Meritocracy, written by Michael Young, is an excellent study of what it would mean, what a society like that would look like, that is run purely on individual merit. This book was written in 1957, and Young wrote it as a satire, actually. The story, or the account offered in this book, is based, assumes the year 2034. And he imagines British society in the year 2034, and the basis here is that by the year 2034, Britain is a pure meritocracy. So social position is determined only by individual merit. To use Weber's terminology, now you can say this would be a system which is run purely based on your market position, purely based on class, not on long family legacy, not on status, but purely by, say, the skills that you have to offer in the market. If you have good skills to offer, in a meritocracy you will rise high. Now, interestingly, this meritocracy that Young imagines for the year 2034, he describes as a world of extreme social turmoil and social revolution, where people rise up against the meritocracy. So on the surface this sounds really strange, because it sounds, shouldn't this be a fairer system where it's much more acceptable, the social stratification that exists more acceptable because it's really based on individual merit. But Young, through creating the story that way, makes the argument that the operation of status in society, so alongside of class, the operation of status, so the claim to esteem based on a long history of wealth, being born into a wealthy and influential family, that is really what makes stratification actually more acceptable to everyone, that status also operates. Because in such a system, which is not based on meritocracy, but where status plays a huge role, if you are in a low position in society, you can still tell yourself it's because you were not given the opportunity. Society didn't give you the opportunity, and that is why you are in a low position. But in a meritocracy, if in a meritocracy you are in a low position, you know it's because of your individual failures, because you are inferior as an individual. So Young makes the argument this would be a much cruder society, fair in the sense, if you define fairness as being gaining a position based on your merit, fairer in that sense, but much cruder and much harder to take for everyone. So that's a curious, Young is basically taking further Weber's analysis of status and class. And it's a real dystopia, what we would imagine on the surface as a utopia. Yeah, no status anymore, it's just what counts as your individual effort, but he describes it as a dystopia, not as a utopia. So it's a very negative future of social uprising. Okay, this being said, let's introduce the last of the three concepts in this text, party. So that's the third ideal type. Now, party operates at a different level of analysis from class and status. Class and status refer to groupings of people. Party, on the other hand, refers to formal organizations. So organizations meaning that they are based on some kind of rule system, a rational order, some books of rules that determine membership and responsibilities, really spell it out, and that have a professional staff that actually carries out the activities of the organization. And it is oriented, organizations are oriented toward acquiring social power, so to affect certain actions in the broader realm. Either at the level of what we define as a nation state, a country, or even only for a certain group of people, just for its members, but it's oriented towards affecting action. So to give you a few examples, the most obvious, of course, would be political parties. And we immediately think, when we hear of party, we immediately think of political parties. But Weber would have also counted organizations, say, like the Cancer Society, or Amnesty International, fighting for the release of political prisoners, or a lobbying organization like AIPAC, the American Israel Public Affairs Committee. Those would also be parties, because all of these are oriented towards changing certain things in society, influencing policies. So if you just look now at political parties can represent interests based on class, but they can also represent interests based on status, or a mix of those two. Again, to look at the difference to Europe, if I'm taking the example of Germany, the political party system is much more based actually on class interests than in the US. For example, working class people tend much more to vote for the Social Democratic Party, and middle class, upper middle class people tend much more to vote for the Christian Democratic Union. But even in Germany, you have status that is playing a role. For example, the Green Party, which is the environmentalist party, founded only in the 1980s. You will find people of very different class backgrounds that count themselves as supporters of the Green Party. So this goes from poor students to working class people to the upper middle class. So they simply represent the status interests of those who define themselves as following an environmentalist lifestyle. So more based on class, but even there you find mixes. If you think about the political landscape in the United States and the difference between the only two existing parties, because we don't have a multi-party system, only a two-party system, Democrats versus Republicans, yes, to some degree, of course we can say that working class people tend somewhat more to vote for the Democrats, versus, say, Wall Street bankers would tend more towards voting for the Republicans. But it's much more complicated than that, because think about all the debate of the role of gender and the role of ethnicity in voting for different parties. We know that women tend more to vote Democratic. African Americans historically have tended more towards voting Democratic. With Hispanics, it's a little bit more complicated. Also, religious conservatives have tended over the past many decades to vote more Republican. So this is based on religious status groups, so representing certain religious interests rather than pure class interests. Because many religious conservatives in this country, they actually are really working class. So you have in the Republican Party rather poor people fighting alongside rather rich people. So it's not only class that determines what interests political parties here represent.